Welcome to Astro Chat with Anne Sundell, Kimberly Williams, and Monica Anna. We are three professional astrologers living in three separate countries, coming together every new and full moon to share our 3 points of view on astrology. Whether you enjoy deep dives into the current transits or you are just beginning to learn about astrology for the first time, there is a place for you here. All that is required is an appreciation for astrology, along with a respect for the various traditions within it. So grab a mug of coffee, your favorite cup of tea, or any other beverage of your choice, and join us for a chat on the astrology of the next 2 weeks. Hi, everybody. Welcome back for another Astro Chat. If this is your first time here, welcome. I am Kimberly Williams, and I'm joined with my friends and fellow astrologers, Monica Anna and Anne Sundell. We are 3 professional astrologers, and we live on 3 different continents. We have 3 different points of view about astrology, and we get together for just under an hour, once every 2 weeks, every new moon and full moon, to look at the transits, the major things that stand out to us that are happening. And today we're going to be looking at the full moon of June 14th. Here in the central time zone of the United States, it'll be at 6:52 a.m. in the morning. Over in the UK, it'll be at 12:52 in the afternoon, and in Finland, 2:52. So wherever you live and however you're experiencing it, welcome to our conversation. Before we dive in, I do want to just make a little comment. We are filming this on the day Mercury's going retrograde in Gemini. So our normal 20-minute prep before we hit the record button took more like an hour and 20. Okay, I exaggerate, but seriously, we expect this to be a bit of a different, a bit different. Communications are going to be interesting. So here's hoping that, the Mercury is our planetary ally and decides to be kind with us, and technology behaves and everything else behaves. We'll see how it goes. We'll check in at the end. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Monica, who's going to take the lead on talking to us about this full moon.
I want to say, here is hoping this episode doesn't have to be re-recorded. But let's see how it goes. So June 14th, we have a full moon in sign of Sagittarius. If you've listened to any of the episodes before, we've talked about full moon and new moon and the difference of the energies between those 2 phases. So here we are yet again in the phase of celebration, of gratitude, of the peak of the cycle, and at the same time, that moment where we're going into the waning phase of the moon. And we're going now to be stripping and releasing the energy and going down into the underworld. And the moon is in a sign of Sagittarius. I do like that sign. I have to say I am biased about Sagittarius because coming out of the deep, dark water of Scorpio, that kind of water that like that kind of cold bath that just like icicles just, goes straight through your body, your bones. That's the waters of Scorpio. We're going now into fire of Sagittarius, and that vision of Sagittarius, that joy that Sagittarius brings. It's like, oh, I see something and I do want to do it, and it's that very much like a childlike joy about the new adventure. When I think about Sagittarius, I always think about that clip. I think this was from The Hobbit. It was from The Hobbit. It's when Bilbo Baggins is running across and screams, "I'm going on an adventure." This is so Sagittarius. He didn't know where was he going, what he was getting himself into. He didn't know the map. He just knew some mates invited him on an adventure of the lifetime, and he said yes. And I think this is kind of the essence of Sagittarius for me, the kind of essence of say yes and figure it out later. The figuring it out is Capricorn. It's the next sign. Like, we'll say yes, and then we have to do the planning, and then we have to do the preparation. It's like, your mate is saying to you, should we run a London Marathon? Yeah, sure. And then the hard work starts in Capricorn, right? but we're not quite there yet. So we have this amazing energy of saying yes, celebrating celebrating and being grateful for having opportunities to say yes. This is the full moon that I would look at all the freedom and opportunities that I have in my life. And again, depending on where you are, in what circumstances you are, you know, there might be restrictions, whether within the family, whether within your situation, you know, whether within your religion. There are always some kind of restrictions and some boundaries. We all have Saturn and Capricorn somewhere, but there's always an opportunity somewhere. There's always a vision for something else. And at the full moon in Sag, I would be looking at where the light shine into that vision. How can I expand on that? How can I be grateful for having it? And how can I maybe celebrate even those small wins that I said yes to something? I don't know, even there's so much of stress and anxiety going on in the world. And even just celebrating something, you know, like, do you know what? I went for coffee on my own to a coffee shop, and I broke that kind of anxiety, you know, that social anxiety that, let's say, I have. Even something like that, celebrating something like that, it's huge. So for me, Sagittarius, it's not about those kind of amazing vision that I want to be entrepreneur and, you know, be CEO and, you know, I don't know, create a worldwide company. Maybe that's your thing. But maybe you can celebrate that, you know what, I always like cycling and I don't have anyone else, and I said yes to a cycling group in my neighborhood. I don't know anyone, I'm a bit scared, but I said yes to that because I want to follow adventure and I want to join something that brings me joy. So yeah, I think you can hear in my voice that I am quite excited about this. I'm going to bring Jupiter, before I'm going to pass over to you girls, I'm going to bring Jupiter into that. And I think that's another energy kind of kick. Jupiter just moved into Aries. And in our previous episode, we were talking about Jupiter moving into the sign of Aries. So we expanded a bit more on that. But Jupiter is the ruler of this lunation. So we have Moon in Sagittarius in the sign of fire, and then we have the ruler in the sign of fire. I mean, everything is on fire. So on one hand, it can be incredible lunation when our hearts and our passions are on fire and we can feel it and we have the expansion to do something. You know, universe brings that fire under our butts and we just expand with that. There is always a shadow side, because I wouldn't be myself if I didn't bring the shadow side. So it can be, you know, I'm expanding so much, I'm scorching and burning everything around me. So I'm saying yes to all this stuff without consequences or thinking about, you know, how that affects my my relationships or my environment. So there's always shadow side to that. But I think it's, you know, looking at this, it's interesting and very, I might bite my tongue later. I'll be interested to re-listen to this episode. But I think this is probably the most optimistic moon that we had in a while. We recorded quite a few of those. There were interesting one, there were intense one, there were the one connected with Uranus. This is probably the first one I actually feel optimistic, maybe cautiously optimistic. What do you guys think?
I love how it took down the Sagittarius moon to a practical level, like how you can do it. You don't have to have the high visions, the too high expectations. What I feel about Sag moon is that with this sign, we're really aiming for somewhere. We're aiming for something, no matter if we will reach it, like a Capricornian, a different kind of goal setting, but just that we are going somewhere. We're on the journey, and the journey is more important than if we are going to reach that goal. We have a goal, and we have something to be enthusiastic about, to be happy about, to vision, to be excited about, and the freedom of having these dreams and aspirations. And there's something about this fire energy here that I also feel. I guess I'm biased too with a lot inside, but I also feel a bit optimistic about this moon. What do Kimberly say?
No way, you're optimistic. That's
It's
too
seldom.
Scorpio
It's
rising being
seldom.
optimistic.
Yeah, like cautiously, very cautiously
Yeah.
optimistic.
I can tell I'm with people with a lot of Scorpio energy. We're cautiously optimistic. I think
Yeah.
that's great. I'm also optimistic, very much so. I'm loving the energy. I'm loving. We mentioned in our last podcast 2 weeks ago that it's so nice to have lunations on the other side of eclipses. I'm really excited. Here's our second lunation after eclipses, so I'm excited. I do think that in addition to, I love what Monica you were saying about say yes, especially with that Jupiter being in Aries. It's like say yes, yes now, please, right? I I also think that Sagittarius is about feeding our fire. We talk a lot about Leo being the fire, and Aries is the out there and shiny and sparky fire. But to me, with Sagittarius, it's like, how are you going to feed your fire? It is about travel. It is about spiritual travel. It is about maybe pursuing something that helps us awaken to that kind of energy. So I don't know. I just have that song going through my head. Come on, baby, light my fire. It just keeps playing, and I get the sense that there'll be this questioning going on in my own inner world of what is it that I'm excited about. It has been a really long. Did I mention it's been long? Couple of years. And so I get the sense that with this, it's sort of that what is going to make me feel optimistic? What is it that I'm excited and passionate for? What is it I want to be bringing back into my life? And so this could be that night of, remembering, of soul searching, of just having a good time and suddenly remembering what it feels like to kind of experience some joy. So whether it's just a great party night, and embracing some hedonistic Sagittarius energy, or whether it's going to meditate and do some soul searching, I don't think it matters what we do as long as it's right for us, but it's that remembering to connect on a soul level, what it is that we're excited and passionate about and what makes us enjoy being here. So yeah, I'm not cautious. I am extremely optimistic. Check.
I love that when we first decided to do the podcast, we decided to do it around the moons. And what I love about that is that we can actually take each archetype, each zodiac sign as it goes and actually work with that energy and be able to play and talk about that energy because it's different. The next full moon in Capricorn will be completely different. We'll be talking about grounding and taking responsibility. And I actually made a note. I love how you said that the journey with Sagittarius, the journey is more important. It's not about the achievement. That's the next archetype. And let's enjoy what happens. And I think, again, just taking a step back and just doing this podcast, what it reminds me is it reminds me of the cycles. It reminds me, if you don't work with the moon, I would encourage you to start working with that and start working every month with the different archetype, because you will really understand where they're coming from and what energy do they bring. And in the world that we live now, we sometimes skip through certain phases. We all want to achieve something like yesterday, and we all, don't think about those hours that we need to put in the gym. We're already thinking about the medal that we're going to win. And yeah, there is something to be said for the vision that we have to do and put before we actually start even working on it. But it's that joy that actually the whole adventure is not about getting to the destination. It's all those bloppers that happens kind of, in between, that kind of, I don't know, you have a flat tire and you have stopped somewhere, and then you stop somewhere and when you meet someone on that station, and it's all that creates life. It's not when you're getting stressed or worried that you haven't reached that destination yet. You can miss all those little things that happened a few years ago. It's been a bit, it's been a while, but I've done a bit of Camino de Santiago, which is the pilgrimage route in Spain, and I've done bit in the north Spain with a couple of my dear friends. And it's the road that changes you. It's not actually arriving at the destination and looking at the cathedral. It's the time on the road, putting one foot, in front of the other, meeting people that you wouldn't have met otherwise. that was the life-changing experience. That was the experience, again, very Sagittarian, that expanded my view, that expanded something, that taught me something. Again, those are all the kind of keywords for Sagittarius. So this is kind of, like I said, sorry, I actually wrote it down. Is journey is more important than the destination. And I think on that full moon, I will be journaling on that. I'm going to literally just make a note of that and put it as a tip for myself. So Anne, thank you. Because it is that reminder. Sagittarius is that reminder that we're aiming for something. And another thing that actually, when you said that, sorry, I really, again, Jupiter in Sagittarius, Jupiter in fire, Sagittarius full moon, I'm talking a lot. I can see I'm connecting to a different energy at every episode. But what you said is that aiming, you know, the kind of saying, when you aim for the stars, you can land on the moon. Again, it's the aiming, it's the Sagittarian vision. And it's not necessarily reaching for that star. But if you're reaching so far and you have that aim and you say yes and you're getting, you will still go higher than if you go, oh yeah, it's too far. Yeah. And if I calculate the route and the kind of energy that will take, you will never get off the ground. So that aim is something that gets you going, and it's so important, and it's the fire that fuels later the persistence of Capricorn. So yeah, that's another layer that I just wanted to add.
I love the idea of the aiming, and there's also this concept with Sagittarius about wanderlust. You know, sometimes as the archer, we're pulling back and we're not necessarily aiming at a target always. Sometimes there is, you know, a goal in mind, but more often than not, it's just the joy of that flight, the joy of that journey, of pulling back the arrow and aiming for what's beyond the horizon, aiming for the unknown. That kind of is exciting energy that I think we can really see here. So I'm looking forward to seeing what this brings in for sure. I'm going to echo something Monika said earlier. You were talking about shadow. So I'm going to start talking a little about shadow because we have some aspects happening. We have a T-square that stands out to me with Neptune at 25 degrees Pisces, squaring that 23 degrees lunation of the moon in Gemini and the moon in Sagittarius. For me, this brings up the shadow side of Sagittarius, which can often be exaggeration. I think one of the challenges is with this full moon can be that, oh, I'm excited, I'm optimistic, I've got a vision, I know where I want to go, but that just seems so large. How am I going to get there? And then we pull back into the Sun and Gemini energy of, but I have all these details and I have all these things I need to do before I can go. And then the push of, but I'm ready to go now, screw the details. And sort of that, I can't see the forest for the trees, or I'm stuck in the trees and I miss the forest analogy. We can get caught in this back and forth energy. And by itself, that's not so hard to navigate. But then here comes the T-square with Neptune, which I think means we don't see it. So we can overfocus, overemphasize on breaking things down. We might feel that need of, I need to create the Capricorn plan. And as both of y'all mentioned, like Capricorn's the next sign. First, you got to have the vision. Then you come out with a plan or a destination or a journey. Then you plan it, right? So we might get overly focused on, I need to figure out the details before I can move. We might get overly focused on I need to move now, especially since, as Monika mentioned, Jupiter, who's ruling the sign the moon is in Aries. So it could be this, exaggerated, I need to do it now, or I'll never get to do it. I'll miss the opportunity. If not now, never. And I think because of this Neptune energy, we're not seeing that so clearly. Others might see it in us, but we may not see it in ourselves so much. And the worst case scenario for me, when you've got something of this nature, is if we find something we believe in so much, right, that it's life-changing, then we can become the zealot who wants to beat everyone over the head with a 2x4 because, I'm now discovered vegetarianism, and if you're not a vegetarian, there's something wrong and you're unhealthy, or I've quit smoking, and if you don't give it up, there's something wrong, or fill in the blank. In other words, it's great to have a vision and remember this is what's right for me, not this is what is right. And I think that can be a real shadow with Sagittarius is we get so excited and so passionate and so on fire Okay, that we forget that the perspective, losing perspective is really important with Sagittarius, being able to see things and have a new perspective, but know that that's for me. And I always feel that when there's a T square and we're caught up in some of that energy, what can really help is to bring in the fourth sign that's not present. So embracing, consciously and choosing to embrace some Virgo energy of, how is this improving my life? If preaching to everybody isn't improving my life, maybe I need to just be doing the vision and not telling everyone about it. Coming back to this idea of, how can I do things in a way that feels practical, grounded? If the vision feels so large, maybe I just figure my first 3 steps. I don't need to get so into the details. I have it all figured out. So practical application, a little grounding. And then also, and I definitely want to hear what y'all have to say, but also, another important aspect that jumps out is the fact that we have a sextile to Saturn in Aquarius. And we've talked about Saturn in Aquarius numerous podcasts now, because it keeps squaring our nodal axis. But here we have that moon making a sextile, bringing in some harmonious energy if, and I want to say if with capital letters, to me this is like, if I am willing to take responsibility for making that vision a reality. Maybe it's not up to me to do it alone. Maybe it's about connecting in a very Aquarian way with people who are like-minded, with groups to help me carry that vision so I can sustain the enthusiasm for more than the night of the full moon. I don't know. I'm sure y'all have other thoughts about Saturn and Neptune, and I'd love to hear what each of you have to say on that.
Well, I think this new moon will be, full moon. It will be a time where you should take it easy and take a rest and go through what you have achieved. But I think it will be very hard to sit still. It will be very hard to be in one place when you want to do all those things. And the Aries Jupiter is certainly not wanting to wait for anything. And that's also what I think with Sagittarius, like you said, Kimberly, that you overdo things, and also physically you overdo things. You maybe want to eat a lot of some good food, or you maybe want to drink a lot, or you maybe want to go out in nature and do some sports, and you might strain a muscle or something. So I just think about the physical aspect of it, that it can also be a time where it's good to take it a bit easy with overdoing, even though you are so enthusiastic. You will get there in time. Even it might be hard to get a rhythm that's not too fast, maybe.
Yeah, I like what you, Kimberly, said about this, the shadow side and being too zealous and too much. Too much is probably the key word. Again, not probably, it is the key word for Jupiter as well, ruler of the Sagittarius. And I always think about Sagittarius, about 2 kind of archetypes, teacher and preacher. They both fit within the Sagittarius, and they both have such a different energy. Like teacher for me, and I'm talking at the best version of the teacher of that archetype, is someone who's educating you, who's showing you the world, who's showing you possibilities and helping you sort out that data. Again, opposite side of Gemini, helping you sort out the data that you've gathered, show you a bit better, bigger vision, bigger option, and help you see the world, and teach you how to be in that world, how to ask questions, how to sort out the data that you've gathered for yourself, so you can make informed decisions based on what you've gathered. Where preacher doesn't give you an option for free will, doesn't give you an option for sorting out data and making sure that you're the one making decision based on the information that you've gathered. Preacher is the one telling you, this is the way, there's only one way, and it's my way. And that's the difference. Obviously we're talking, I'm talking of that kind of negative aspect of preacher, not just in general, but the way when people say, this is the way, this is the highway, that's it, that's my way, there is no other way. And we see that everywhere. We see that in religion, we see that in politics, we see that with our friends. Whoever is so passionate, that passion can teach us more. I mean, talk to, like you say, you gave the example of vegetarian. Talk to someone who is passionate about being vegetarian and making difference. And if they are in that teacher mode, they will share with you, and that's the difference. They will share with you their thoughts, their reasoning, how they came to make that decision, what was behind it, what data they've gathered, and they'll share with you for you to make informed decision. They won't push you. For the someone who is in that kind of negative preacher mode, they won't share with you how they got to it, because chances are they just made a decision being pushed into a corner as well. And now they're just trying to justify their own vision by pulling other people into it. So they will literally, suffocate you with the amount of information, or this is the way, and if you think differently, that's not good. It's the good and bad situation as well. So I think that's definitely with that full moon, the heightened level of those emotions, of that, I have this vision, I want to share it, and with that heightened level of emotions at the full moon, and the Jupiter being in Aries, that can really pull us into that negative state. With the Neptune, I'm glad you're bringing that T-square. With the Neptune, I feel like whenever Neptune squares planets, especially lunation or the nodes, there is the element of dissolving, disappointment, and with this lunation, there might be the element of, am I disappointed in my vision? Is my vision too little? Or is my vision too big and I'm disappointed in myself that I haven't gathered enough data, resources, you think of it, Gemini, to actually reach that vision in Sagittarius. So I think with the Neptune, that full moon might bring all those kind of bottled up emotions that we're pushing into that unconscious, and it might bring that. Or that vision that we have, at that full moon might dissolve, or we might see it that it wasn't a vision, it was illusion. And where we kind of lying to ourselves, saying yes to something that's actually not achievable, or we're aiming for something that is not quite there. So I would with that Neptune squaring this lunation, I would be looking out for, where do I expand the joy and the vision and the aim that I have? And what needs to be dissolved because it's clouding and fogging the true vision?
Yeah. Also, too, I'm thinking, as you're saying that, I'm thinking, we've mentioned a couple times in our last podcast with all the eclipse energy that recently happened, especially the eclipse in Scorpio energy, that a lot of us had plans that maybe we're releasing. I thought I had it all figured out, and now suddenly there's something else coming forward. By the same token, there's a lot of energy with, we had a big dream this last year with Jupiter going through Pisces, and now that it's in Aries and we're having to put it into action, there might be some stops and starts, re-envisioning the vision. And for me, I just think with Sagittarius, it's so easy sometimes to feel that call for a vision, but I don't know what the vision is. I need something new and different. I need out of my box. I need what's beyond the horizon. So I'm wondering if, too, that disappointment feeling could come from, I had a plan and now it's gone. I don't have something to replace it, or I don't have a plan yet. I feel, and there's been a lot of discussion lately in my world with people I know. So I'm wondering if we'll see this manifest when we get to the time of this podcast gets released, if we get to this full moon. I've heard a lot of people talking about, I feel like the time is ready, but I don't know what I'm ready for. I feel like I need to make changes to be positioned for what comes next, but I have no idea what's coming next. And it can feel real scary, right? To be making changes, like, am I changing jobs? Am I bringing in a roommate? Am I getting, moving into a solo? Like, we're all making kind of some big changes in our life about how we're positioning ourselves to be ready for the next stage of the journey, but no one's given us the roadmap of what that is. So I'm wondering too, if this is that intensification of confusion, which can be so Neptunian, or also if that disappointment could be, I thought I'd have the dream all figured out, but it's not all figured out. And so being able to trust the journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am thinking actually to the last episode that we recorded at the new moon, which was the first lunation after the eclipse, and that was the first lunation where the Mercury actually went retrograde. And the Mercury at the full moon on the 14th of June, the Mercury is actually now in direct motion. It's still in its shadow. And the day before the lunation, it enters Gemini. So I think there's a lot in the previous episode about rethinking and using that Mercury retrograde and having those two options that we were discussing. These two options that usually comes with Gemini. And this lunation feels like it's more optimistic. But if we've done the work of the previous lunation, the Mercury retrograde, if we use that, maybe positively, or put some work and actually had time to journal on things, rethink our thought patterns, feel the feelings, actually go deeper, this lunation can be more positive and bring that kind of optimism, because hey, we had the time with the Mercury retro to figure things out, and things might have changed, or we might have took a different road, and now we have a different vision. If we haven't, that lunation might be like, hey, I had a vision, and oh, it's dissolving as I talk. It's, it's disappearing. It's foggy. I can't quite clearly see it because of that Neptune. So I do think the more I look into astrology, the more I am in awe how everything flows together, and how when we get in tune with those cycles, they flow from one into another. And I feel like the previous new moon and this full moon is actually linked to that journey. Very much of the eclipses and the retro, putting some, kind of changes into our vision. They're bringing different options. They're bringing things out of the blue. They're bringing new people, new options, new possibilities, new opportunities. Whether good or bad, that's to be decided. But we need to start making decisions. And yeah, at this full moon, we will see what needs to be dissolved and what is dissolving without us necessarily wanting it to dissolve. So yeah, I think you're making a really good point there.
I think too that with Mercury being ingressing into Gemini, and of course we're in the post shadow of that Mercury retrograde, right? It was at zero back on May 21st, May 22nd. So what was happening in our world just before the last new moon could be very significant, could be tied in here. And it's making this sextile to Jupiter that we were talking about, that Jupiter in Aries is making the sextile to the Mercury that's now at zero Gemini. And so, I'm just kind of connecting some dots here, how mercurial is that? I'm connecting dots, and I'm just kind of wondering, so does this mean that if we need someone to help us bridge the gap, this is a time to find those teachers, those mentors, that perhaps it's about, oh, I don't yet have the vision, but I think it's around this. Let me go find someone who knows that. Or as Monika was saying, like, let me go ask people who are in that field or in that area or know about that topic. And through sharing and conversation and through informing ourselves and educating ourselves, maybe some clarity will start to emerge. So I'm feeling even more hopeful now that I've kind of noticed that connection happening.
Yeah.
This could be a good time also to study or take some course or something in a new subject that really might kind of blow your mind at this time, that you will find something new that really interests you at least this moment, and that might give you a new perspective on things.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So I don't think we talked last time much. We had so much on that new moon lunation to talk about, but I don't think we talked a lot about Venus going in Taurus. And I know Venus is pretty active. And you want to start us off talking about that?
Yeah, I think we didn't mention it so much. Venus is the ruler planet of Taurus. So in this sign, Venus will be peaking in a way, and at the same time Venus is also very close to the North Node that is in Taurus. So sandwiched between the North Node and Uranus, which is a quite interesting place for Venus to be. Classically, I think, when I think of Venus in Taurus, I think about beauty, about sensuality, about our senses, about how we can enjoy life, how we can feel beautiful, how we can really be friendly, be loving, I mean, a lot of spontaneously, a lot of good positive things comes to mind with Venus in Taurus. When looking at Venus also, what aspect Venus is making here. Venus is also squaring Saturn with the 5-degree orb. Venus is conjunction Uranus. So even in a classical way, this Venus is maybe not that classic. We have some other planets that might have this Venus be a bit more rocky than usual in Taurus, maybe. So I also think that Venus here might somehow connect to the values, and there has been a lot of evaluation of values since January when Venus is retrograding Capricorn, and also during the spring, and we really had to think about our values with Uranus also closing and the node closing up. I think there might be something that affects our status, our values, and we have to rethink maybe something about this, maybe about what we value and how we want to make choices. With Saturn squaring, we might need to do some rethinking of how we value things and what's the most important thing, and how can we really take a serious thought about that. I don't know. That's what comes to mind.
Yeah. I mean, when I think about Venus in Taurus as well, it's the desire that needs literally body, a woman's body, Mother Earth body. So I think it might be interesting to look at Venus transit through Taurus, catching up with Uranus, catching up with North Node, and seeing how in the media, in the news, how woman body is perceived, what desires around our bodies and our autonomy and our freedom, that's very Iranian, are there, and what are not. Like you say, at this lunation, she will be squaring. Am I doing that right? Yes, she's squaring Saturn. And coming up to a trine with Pluto. The idea of boundaries and powers that be and power struggle around women and their bodies and their desires, that's something that might be playing up both on individual level, but also on a global level. Where do we need autonomy to express ourselves, to express what's worth to us? How do we perceive our own worth, the worth of our own bodies? How do we value ourselves and our own bodies? I mean, that can be a beautiful healing time for our own sake, to actually understand our connections with our physical body, but also with the physical body of Earth as well. The ecology, the food production, sustainability, all those themes can come up to the surface. With the Uranus being in Taurus, we haven't really touched much on Uranus separately, but we've been talking about it since, just three of us, since 2018. The ultimate freedom around expressing your own values and expressing your own body, that's something that Uranus in Taurus for me brings quite strong. And like with everything, the light and dark, the two sides of the coin and the two sides of pendulum, when it swings one way, it kind of goes back the other way. So those extreme forces always have, so to speak, equal, opposition. So the more we want to express our own freedom around our own bodies and taking initiative in that regard, the more opposition there will be. And when I talk bodies, I do mean, our physical ones, but also the body of Mother Earth, our own homes, our own land, what we can and cannot do with our own land. So on one hand, we have the need to do that and to free ourselves and be a bit more revolutionary around that. On the other hand, the powers from Saturn and Pluto are still trying to grab at restriction and putting boundaries and, putting a bondages around that and telling us, what we can and cannot do. So I will be looking out for themes coming up, both in my own personal life, life of my family and friends, and actually in the media as well around those themes.
I'm going to weave together something I heard each of you say into something that's happening here in the United States. So it's been really interesting to follow Venus's transit through Taurus thus far. And of course, she started off with her contacts to Uranus. And I remember Lynn Bell saying in a workshop ages ago that whenever Uranus is in Taurus, it's generally speaking a good time for women's rights, for moving the causes of women forward. And if I remember correctly, roughly around the ingress of Uranus into Taurus was roughly aligned with the beginning of the Me Too movement over here. So we see that parallel. Well, now here comes Venus, right? Contacting. And as everyone said, it's about our values. It's about our bodies. It's about women's bodies. So what about how we apply our values onto women's bodies? And even though we focus more on natal charts, and I know we've all agreed not to get super political, it's kind of hard not to mention what's happening in the world around us, right? It's interesting. Lynn Bell mentioned eons ago at some workshop I attended that Uranus transiting through Taurus tends to be an 8-year period that's really good for women's rights or moving women's rights forward. And we saw that with back in 2018, 2019, when Uranus went into Taurus and was doing its little retrograde dance and finally moving, roughly corresponded with the Me Too movement, if I remember my dates correctly. And so, every time things are kind of going through, I like to pay attention to what's happening. Is anything happening for women's rights, especially since so much has been contacting Uranus through this transit? Now we have Venus here. And thank you, Monika, for reminding me. If we go back a bit to when the leak in the United States, there's a Supreme Court is hearing a case, for those who aren't aware, is hearing a case about abortion rights in another state. And does the state have the right to reduce the time frame that somebody can have abortion, which basically is going against a prior standing court case. That's the bare bones general gist. And so it's interesting that while Venus was in Aries, right, and contacting Chiron, I believe, we had this like, what is the deep wound happening? And let's touch that. And how do we bring healing? And more or less close to the day she ingressed, give or take a day, we had this leak that the court has decided to reduce, scale back, impose more limitations around abortion. And there was an immediate outcry and a lot of this Uranian revolutionary outcry, and that just cannot happen. So it's interesting to follow and to track. And the final statement, decision, is going to be officially released by the Supreme Court the end of June. So as this transiting Venus makes her perfects and makes her exact square to Saturn, and as she goes further along and makes that trine to Pluto, right? Power, structure, government, on and on and on. It'll be really interesting to see what comes from that and how this transit kind of is being mirrored on our day-to-day scale here.
Yeah, I'm going to be paying close attention to that. I think we should talk about Uranus in Taurus a little bit more. We've been talking about it since 2018, and I think we all observe the changes in our own lives around that. But yeah, it's interesting. And again, it's not about being political. It's about just observing what's happening in the world. And countries like you say, like United States, trying to curb the freedom of women and impose those limitations. That's such a wounding. That is this Chiron in Aries wounding around freedom. Where and how can we express freedom, and how our freedom to express ourselves and our own beliefs and how that imposes maybe boundaries or restricts someone else's freedom. Because we think that freedom for all, but actually, as you see on the political stage, quite often what one person considers freedom, the other one doesn't, or someone else's freedom and
Right.
expansion actually imposes restrictions on another. So that wounding is happening, and it's interesting, like you say, that Venus that rules that Uranian transit, Uranus is in her house, like he is the guest. She goes like, yeah, let's do the freedom, but like under my roof. You're under my roof, on my yeah. So she's going through it. She's touching that individuality, the need for freedom, the need to say I am and this is me, in Aries. And Uranus in that Taurus, that long-standing transit, talks about, yeah, I want that ultimate freedom to live my values, to be in my body, to feel comfortable and free, and not having that or anything imposed on me, whether it's by court, whether it is, like you mentioned, the Me Too movement by court, whether it's the Me Too movement imposed by people in power in my industry. And I think that's going on not just in the United States, that's going on in a lot of countries. Poland, where I'm from, there's been a lot of strikes by women as well, mainly by women, against the government that's trying to restrict the rights and effectively make abortion illegal, full time, full stop. And I know in South America there's been a lot of that as well. But ultimately, what it is, it's telling women what they can and cannot do with their bodies, regardless of your political views or your religious views. It's someone else is telling a woman what she can and cannot do with her own body. And I think Uranus in Taurus will be really pushing against that.
Yeah. And it is interesting to see people's responses too. Like as I mentioned just a moment ago, a lot of this began when Venus was conjunct Chiron. And so we see right now that here we've got Mars has caught up, and we have Mars and Chiron conjunct at 15 degrees of Aries. They're making wide sextile and trine to the sun and the moon. A fire trine with the moon, and that lovely active polarity sextile with the sun. And so I think there's I'm going to take action. We need to heal. We need, the fire is feeding fire. I know we're running low on time, so I don't want to go into too much, but I just wanted to make a note that, that to me feels like it isn't so much about the action that's out there, that's the stimulus. It's much more about how are we reacting, responding to the energy. There's a big push to, with all that Uranus Taurus energy, to revolt, right? To fight back. Here's Mars, the planet about our inner warrior, saying like, I need to take action. I need to stand up. I need to fight. And we need to bring some fight in a way that brings healing now. It's not about organizing for something we're going to do later. It's very spontaneous and let's go now. So it's always interesting to me when you can see multiple transits all happening in our world at the same time, even though there's different energies.
And it's interesting, just bringing back to this lunation, that is all happening as well with Venus contacting that Uranus, and then around that full moon in Sagittarius. So that adds yet another layer of, is my need for freedom, Sagittarius, impacting someone else? And it's my need for expansion, Jupiter in Aries, expanding, but at the cost of someone else. Is my need, Jupiter in Aries, is my me and I, and me, myself, and I expanding so much at the cost of someone else's freedom, or someone else's comfort, or someone else's worth and values. So yeah, it's interesting how it all kind of comes full circles. I think it's time for the tips now for this full moon. I am going to start, if you don't mind. I actually wrote something that you said earlier, and I had a different tip. I'm going to stick to this one. You said something that made me think about quote from Tolkien. Again, just going back to this writer, that famous quote that not all who wander are lost. And this is Sagittarius energy. This is the full moon energy. And this is something that I would love us to remind ourselves and be grateful for at this full moon, that wandering doesn't mean we're lost. In the world when we need to have all the answers, when we need to have our calling and knowing our destiny since we are 7, and knowing that you want to be, this or that, very often people who are the jack of all trades, people who haven't found their calling yet, or haven't found the amazing job that they know they want to do for the next 70 years, they made to feel like an outcast, or like they don't belong, because, oh my God, well, how did you not figure it out yet? Well, actually, Sagittarius reminds us wandering is an adventure in itself. It expands your horizons. It brings different skills and different points of views and meets different cultures. And it's an aim in itself. You don't have to figure out at the age of 15, what you're going to be doing at the age of 40. If you do, it's amazing. My husband is like that. At the age of 11, he knew what he wanted to be, which is fantastic. But not everyone is like that. Some people will have multiple jobs throughout their lives. Again, it doesn't mean that they cannot settle, a horrible word, but that they just are good at so many things. And, their soul is set on fire by, experiencing with different things. And Sagittarius, for me, is the sign where we meet different culture, when we meet something foreign than us, the foreigners and foreign countries, and just something different than we are. And by meeting that unknown, we are richer for it. We're expanding. Again, the Jupiter that rules that sign, we're expanding our heart, our beliefs, our visions, our meaning in the world. So at this full moon, I would encourage you to meditate on that. Not all who wander are lost. And if you feel lost, maybe journal on all the beautiful things that, being lost and being in the wilderness and wandering around brought to you, and be grateful for them. And that might change your mindset about whether you are lost or not. Yeah, that would be my tip for this full moon.
That sounds really, really great. I will do a different kind of wondering. If you have a astrological chart, I think that maybe many of you have an own chart done, then I would like you to follow the moon's journey in your own chart. When it goes to a house, what habits do you have in that house? What vision do you have for that house? To follow the moon's movements through the houses and explore how that resonates with your life, and if you can find some new visions from that. So that's my thing.
I like both of those. So for me, I think I really want to embrace the world as my oracle during this lunation, in that the week of this full moon, I would encourage people to pay attention to what lights your fire. What are the things you talk about, you hear about, you come in contact with? Maybe it's a flyer you see posted and you're like, I'd love to take that class, but then we talk ourselves out of it. What is it that suddenly, unexpectedly inspires you? What is it that comes forward that you have belief in? Who are the teachers? In other words, just pay attention to what the universe is bringing forward to remind you this is what inspires you, and embrace that. Make a note of that, write that down, because in the month to follow will be when maybe we can take some action around this. The other thing is on the night of, or the day of the night of this lunation, embrace a tiny bit of that hedonistic Sagittarius energy and do something that is just fun. Go light your fire in whatever way that works for you. Those are the things I'm going to be thinking about.
Oh,
Great.
well, have a beautiful lunation, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
Bye.
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 Thank you for joining us in this week's Astro Chat. We hope that you enjoyed the discussion and would love to hear about anything that resonated with you. Keep the conversation going by posting shareable content on our Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube pages. You can also email us at astrochatpodcast@gmail.com. AstroChat is uploaded every 2 weeks on the Saturday before each new and full moon. Look for us on your favorite podcast platform as well as on YouTube. You can support AstroChat and receive exclusive content by donating on our Patreon page. We look forward to chatting with you all again at the next lunation of the moon.